Hello to my dear followers. In the previous two videos, which focused on the components and parameters of Spire, I overlooked a very important and valuable concept that I will be using in my next video, where we'll learn to create pad using the Spire plugin. Here are the definitions: modulation, LFO, and matrix. Modulation and the fundamental concept. In sound synthesis, modulation refers to the process of dynamically altering sound parameters target using another control signal source. This alteration can occur over time, introducing movement, depth, character, and complexity to the final sound. The primary goal of modulation is to prevent sounds from being static and to imbue them with life and expressiveness. Application in music production and sound design. Creating vibrato, subtle, rapid alteration of sound's frequency, pitch, to create a wavering effect. Creating tremolo, subtle, rapid alteration of sound's amplitude, volume, to create a pulsating or breathing effect. Filter movement, filter sweep and movement. Modifying parameters like filter cutoff or resonance to create dynamic wah, wobble, or evolving timbral changes. Waveform shaping, modulating parameters that affect the sound's waveform characteristics. Crafting complex patches, combining multiple modulation to achieve organic, cinematic, or unique electronic timbres. LFO, low frequency oscillator, a common modulation source. An LFO is an oscillator that generates signals at very low frequencies, typically below the range of human hearing, less than 20 Hz. These signals are not directly audible, but are used as control sources to modulate other synthesizer parameters or effects. LFOs produce various waveforms: sine, triangle, square, sawtooth, random, SNH, each dictating a different pattern of change. An application in music production and sound design is vibrato with sine triangle LFO, generating smooth, natural sounding pitch wavering. Tremolo with sine triangle LFO on volume, creating rhythmic fluctuations in loudness. Wobble bass with a square sawtooth LFO on filter cutoff, producing the characteristics rhythmic pulsating bass sound found in genres like dubstep. Arpeggiator-like patterns with a square LFO on pitch, creating stepped pitch sequences. Wind or water sounds with random LFO, generating unpredictable organic textural changes. Controlling effect parameters, modulating delay, time, reverb mix, distortion drive, and etc. to introduce dynamic movement within effects. And matrix, modulation matrix, the modulation management interface. A modulation matrix is a graphical environment or a dedicated section within a synthesizer's user interface, hardware or software, that allows the user to establish, edit, and manage connection between modulation sources and modifiable parameters, targets, in a centralized and organized manner. This matrix typically comprises columns for sources, rows for targets, and values to specify the depth or amount of modulation. And applications. Complexity management. In complex synthesizer with numerous modulators and parameters, the matrix is essential for logically handling a high volume of routing. Global overview provides a rapid way to see which parameters are being modulated by which sources and the intensity of those modulations. Rapid experimentation enables quick assignment of various sources to different parameters and immediate assessment of their impact by adjusting the depth without navigating through multiple menus. Multiple connections facilitates assigning one source to multiple targets or one target to multiple sources, often with prioritization or summation. Workflow optimization streamlines the sound design process allowing producers to focus more on creativity than one technical configuration. More on creativity than on technical configuration. So, the relationships between modulation, LFO, and matrix. Modulation is the overarching concept, the act of one signal changing another. LFO is one type of source that can be used to perform modulation. Other sources include envelopes, velocity, module, sequencers, even audio signals themselves. Matrix is the interface or tool that help you establish and manage the connections between these sources, like an LFO, and the targets, the parameters you want to change, in an organized, visual, and efficient way. In simpler terms, you use an LFO as a signal generator to alter parameters like pitch or filter cutoff modulation. The matrix is the control panel that lets you easily decide which LFO connects to which parameter and how strongly. Now we want to understanding the matrix section in Spire, the hub of sound. The heart of synthesis. Matrix acts like the brain or control center of the synthesizer. The magic of movement. Modern synths don't just produce static sounds. The real magic happens when sound parameters move and change over time. The matrix makes this movement possible. And the goal is to create alive and realistic sounds, mimicking acoustic instruments like the human voice, wind, or guitar strings. And about matrix interface overview. As you see in the Spire, source column. These are the drivers or controllers of the sound. They are things that change on their own and cause other parameters to change. Key sources: oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. The oscillators themselves, often used for pitch, volume, or PWM. Envelope 1 and envelope 2, envelope generators, known as ADSR. These shape the fundamental contour of the sound: attack, decay, sustain, and release. When you press a key, the envelope shapes the sound's loudness or filter over time. LFO1 and LFO2, low-frequency oscillators, slow-moving waves used to create vibrato, tremolo, wah-wah effects, and etc. Velocity, how hard you hit a key on the keyboard. Key follow, how the pitch of the note affects another parameter. For example, higher notes might open the filter more. Mod wheel, modulation wheel. The iconic wheel next to the keyboard, using controlling vibrato or other effects. Target column. These are the synthesizer's parameters that we want to control or change. Key targets: oscillator 1 pitch and oscillator 2 pitch. The fundamentals: frequency, highness, and lowness of the sound. Oscillator volume 1 and oscillator volume 2, the loudness of each oscillator. Filter cutoff, the cutoff frequency of the filter that controls brightness and darkness. Filter resonance, the emphasis at the cutoff frequency. Pan, stereo position, left or right. Chorus, delay and reverb, effect amounts. Control the intensity of built-in effects. Slot, for chaining modulations, you can use the output of one slot as source for another. And amount. This controls how much the source affects the target. Zero, no effect, and a positive fader to right. The source's changes causes an increase or opening of the target parameter. Negative or left is that the source's change causes decrease or closing of the target parameter. And a small amount, subtle, almost imperceptible effect. And a large amount, a strong, obvious effect. And about slots. Each slot represents a complete modulation route, one source, one target, and an amount. You can have up to 15 simultaneous modulation routes. For an example, practical example, we want to create a subtle human-like vibrato. First, in matrix section, choose a slot 1 or the first available slot. 1, we set the source. In the SRC1 section, or whichever is empty and active, look for an option related to oscillator 2, OSC2. If oscillator 2 pitch isn't directly available, just select oscillator 2. We want oscillator 2 itself to be the driver of change. Then set the target. In the TRG or target section, look for an option related to oscillator 1 pitch. If oscillator 1 pitch isn't direct, select oscillator 1P or just oscillator 1. We want the pitch of oscillator 1 to be changed and adjust the amounts. Find the amount slider. Turn the amount very slightly up, just a tiny bit above 0. This small amount means oscillator 1's pitch will be subtly influenced by oscillator 2's pitch, creating a very delicate natural wobble or vibrato similar to the human voice. This makes the sound feel more alive and less artificial. If this amount is too high, the sound might become metallic or sound out of tune. So, play a note and listen carefully. You should hear a very gentle natural modulation in the pitch. And about difference between this and direct LFO. This method differs from applying an LFO directly to pitch. Using oscillator pitch as a source often yields a more organic result because the oscillator's natural waveform is more complex than a simple LFO shape. You should try matrix with different amount values and even different source and target combinations. The matrix is a powerful tool for sound design discovery. For example, velocity as a source and filter cutoff as target means harder hit, brighter sound. For example, module as a source and chorus amount as target means module controls the intensity of the chorus effect. And about matrix. Every Ableton Live device or plugin will have a section explicitly named matrix, like in Spire. The core functionality of advanced modulation routing is very much present and often even more flexible within Ableton Live's ecosystem. Native Ableton instruments. Operator. This FM synthesizer has a robust modulation system where you can assign various sources like LFOs envelopes to different parameters. While it might not be called a matrix, its routing capabilities serve a similar purpose. Wavetable. This synth also features a highly flexible modulation system, allowing you to route modulation sources to numerous targets. Sampler and simpler. These samplers also offer their own modulation capabilities, shaping the sound using envelopes, LFOs, and other sources. And Max for Live. This is a powerful visual programming environment within Ableton Live. Using Max for Live, users can create custom devices, including those that precisely replicate the function of a modulation matrix or offer even more complex routing options. Many professional Max for Live users have developed tools especially for advanced modulation management. And macro controls. Within Ableton Live, you can assign various parameters from a single device or even multiple devices to 8 macro controls. This function like a simplified matrix, allowing you to control multiple parameters simultaneously with a single knob or fader. This is incredibly useful for morphing sounds or creating complex unified changes. You'll find that the concept of assigning modulation sources to different targets to create movement and sonic variation is a fundamental aspect of Ableton Live, implemented through its native instrument, the flexibility of Max for Live, and the intuitive macro controls. Now that you are familiar with the components of the Spire plugin and we understand how to work with the matrix and other terms, in the next video we will proceed to create a path from a reference track using the Spire plugin and Ableton built-in plugins. Stay tuned until the next video, which I think will be released tomorrow or the day after, if Arash helped me. These days, Arash is watching me, and I can focus solely on my projects and videos. Goodbye from Arash and me.